Hey guys, we're back in the workshop and today I've got a really cool project for you because we are building a really huge knife. The customer came to my workshop and he brought me this wooden example of the knife and he asked me to build a steel version out of it, and he requested my more tactical style, and I have really free reign on how I want to style that knife, and I'm really looking forward to this build. So I already made a drawing of the knife, a rough sketch, so I can cut it out of 80 CRV, and I'm going to use 6mm steel, and then we are going to have a really nice distal taper up to the tip so we don't have a really thick knife towards the tip, so it still is going to cut really well. So I have now traced up the template to the steel, and now I have to go to my grinding room. So I'm always wearing steel cap shoes, but now I'm actually wearing steel bottom shoes as well. So that's why you always should wear really good shoes, because this one just melted right into my foot, and it's good that I'm wearing good shoes.
Profiling these big blades is a challenge by itself, but it's also super cool, and you can see how versatile just that hollow grinding wheel is and how crazy corners you can grind and pre-grind with it and just rough everything out. And then I'm going to go to my flat platen and my small contact wheel to square everything up.
So now that the knife is shaped, I've also normalized it because there was a really crazy bend in the knife, and I want to stress relieve it so I don't get a really crazy warp during the heat treatment. And now I have to drill out the holes.
So when you're grinding those big blades, it's always nice to grind them in sections instead of just one smooth go, and in the end you can feather everything in, because otherwise it's super hard to get nice and clean grind lines. And when I'm grinding these big blades, I try to grind them over the corner of the belt grinder, because it just seems you have more pressure on it and it removes the material a little bit faster.
Alright guys, so the knife is now pre-ground and it already lost a lot of weight, and now I can stick it into my heat treating oven, so I will get a nice hard blade afterwards. Alright guys, so the knife is now hardened and tempered, and this one I took up the temper a little bit higher than normally because this knife should be a little bit more shock resistant. So it is now around 85 HRC, and now I have to finalize the grind on this knife. So I have to start working the bevels again and also start working on the distal taper of this knife.
So when I'm grinding this knife, it actually took me quite a long time. You see just a couple of shots of me grinding it, but this actually took a couple of hours to refine the grind, thin the knife down to the desired distal taper that I wanted, and just to get the final shape done. So what I'm actually doing now is I'm heating up the tang of the knife to get it more shock resistant, because I don't want it to be that hard. and I'm always cooling it down with some water in my spritzing bottle, so I don't ruin the temper of the edge. And even though after I turn off the flame of the propane torch, I'm still spritzing the blade area so the heat doesn't warm it down to my blade and ruin my temper there. Normally I don't hand sand my stonewash knives, but with this big knife it's super hard to get a nice even flat surface on the belt grinder, and you can have some small divots in there and you can just hand sand them out because I want to have the surface as smooth as possible and as flat as possible. And this one actually didn't took that long. I used some 180 grit sandpaper to remove all those divots and then just clean it up with a 240 grit, and I'm using glass cleaner to keep my sandpaper from clogging up.
So now that the blade is hand sanded, I have already prepared some G10, and as you can see, these G10 pieces are super thick. There are 2 pieces of 6mm G10 glued together because I have to do a lot of handle sculpting onto this knife right here, and therefore I need a lot of material, and because of the handle shape I have to actually cut a lot of material away, but other than that it wouldn't fit into it, so I have to do a lot of bandsawing and all that kind of stuff. But I hope I can use the cut off pieces and make some cool lanyards out of them so I don't waste all that good material.
So these handle scales are the double thickness that I normally use, and it was already really challenging for me, and I was already thinking how am I going to grind everything. And you can see I have everything clamped up together so I can scribe some lines, and then I can put those pins in there so those scales are together, and that just helps me so I can grind everything together, cut everything together, and I don't have to do it on each scale by itself. And that's just a super nice tip if you're just starting out with knife making. Put those pins in and grind everything together so you have nice and clean lines.
So the handle scales are also now done, ready to be glued up, and I've also drilled some small divots into the inner side of these handle scales so there's more epoxy and more bonding action in between. And I've also sandblasted the insides of the scale so the G10 has a rougher texture so the epoxy can bond better. So it's now the next day and the glue has been set up. Now my task are to remove those clamps and grind the G10 flush with the tang of the knife. And after that I have to figure out how to shape the handle with all those contourings and how to maybe also add my style to it.
So now I'm squaring everything up on my small contact wheel, and I've set the work rest to a 90-degree angle. And that helps me with later laying out some lines where to grind to.
Alright, so let's plan this handle. What should I do?
Rock pattern.
No, I can't just add rock pattern.
Yes, you can.
No, I can't rock pattern everything and sandblast it. It just doesn't work like that. I have to go out of my comfort zone and maybe not rock pattern everything, but maybe some sandblasting. That's a good idea.
So I took some inspirations from the wooden handle, but the customer also allowed me to have free rein on the handle, but just make it similar to the knife that he brought me and maybe make it a little bit easier for you. And this grind was super challenging, like just to get my head around it and how to grind all those curves and get everything nice and smooth was super tricky. And I was always thinking, like, how should I hold the knife? How should I grind it now? How can I get this curve now ground? Especially this part here was super challenging because my belt is only 5 centimeters wide, but this part was like around 6, so you couldn't grind it in just one go, so you had to feather everything in. So I also changed out my contact wheels because sometimes I needed a smaller one, sometimes a little bit thicker one, and that's really nice when you have a versatile grinder where you can change everything out for the purpose that you need them.
So the handle is now roughly shaped on the belt grinder, and there are some knife makers that can take it up to 90% done on the belt grinder or even more, but let's be honest, I'm not that good yet. So I have to do now a lot of handworks with files and sandpaper to get everything right.
So after the stage on the belt grinder, I was already pretty happy because with the files, it's super hard to mess everything up. And now I just had to refine everything. And as I said before, a lot of people can do much more work on the belt grinder, but I never made something like that before. And it's not my normal job to make handles like that. And that's why I was like, no, I'm not going to go to that chance to mess it up on the belt grinder. And that's why I did a lot of handwork right there. And after the hand sanding, I just had to sandblast it because I love the look of G10 that's got sandblasted and just feels amazing, and you have a nice uniform surface in the end.
So the handle is now finally shaped, and it was super challenging to make, but it was also really fun to do because I never made something like that before. I've also sandblasted now the surface because the dark finish that I'm going to apply now will stick to the stonewash finish a little bit better, and I get a better result when darkening it. And after darkening down the blade, I just only have to sharpen it, and then I'm done with this knife.
I'm darkening down that blade with a gun bluing solution, and I'm also working on a video on how to use that gun bluing, so stay tuned for that.
You might ask why I'm kneeling on the floor. Because this knife doesn't fit into my stone washing machine. And that's why I've got this bucket full of rocks and gravel. And now I have to shake it violently so I get a cool stonewash finish onto this knife. Because all my knives need stonewash finishing. And that's why I am doing that for you guys. That's amazing! The knife is now done and I'm pretty happy on how it turned out, especially with the handle. This was my main concern because it was super tricky to grind and just get my head around that. But now I'm super happy and it is really cool. Especially you can grip it up front right here, and that this choil right here sets in here, and then you have a super comfortable grip, and you can have also different handle positions on that knife, and you also don't slip up onto the knife because you got that thicker area right here. And it is a really cool knife already, and I'm so happy that I've made this knife. And I hope you guys enjoyed that video as much as I love to build this knife. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and write a comment to the algorithm god. And I post videos every other Friday, so stay tuned for more cool projects. So these water bottles are actually 25 cents in Germany, so hit that subscribe button so maybe one day I can finally make some money of that and repay those 25 cents.